It is 6 o'clock. I will call the September 13th, 2022 meeting of the Wythe County Board of Supervisors to order. This evening, we have Pastor Greg Kaler from the All Nations Church of God to provide an invitation. If you would, please stand and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let's just bow together for prayer. Father, we thank you for this privilege, Lord, the privilege of serving the community. And Lord, we recognize that without you, Lord, we would fall short. Your word declares in Proverbs chapter 3 to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not upon your own understanding, but in all of your ways acknowledge him. And Lord, you said he shall direct your paths. Lord, we acknowledge you this evening. Grant divine wisdom to these fine men and women, Lord, who are serving the community tonight. For we ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, before we move into citizens' time, I'd like to welcome Chair Waggy and Vice Chair Manley from the school board for joining us tonight. First item on our agenda is always citizens' time. I will call you up to the podium and you have 3 minutes. The first person we have is Mr., is it Mehta? Mehta?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mehta, come on up, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Suki Mehta. I own Fox Mountain Inn Motel in Max Meadow, Virginia. I'm here today regarding my water bill. My water bill has gone, it's become double. Before even I can open the tap, I have to pay $221 just for the base price. Then it went, then there was an increasement in the water and the sewer uses, and it all comes to $2,667 for the year. Due to the economy and everything is slow. This is the last thing in people's mind to go on a vacation. Over 70 million people cancel their vacation for this year. And our occupancy went from 46% to 32, around 33%. So we're taking a big hit. And this increase is bigger than my real estate taxes. And I'm here, now I'm not the only one. Every business is feeling the same way. And I'm here for some kind of a relief on this bill or adjustment of the bill or something, so that's why I'm here for you.
All right, Mr. Mehta. Mr. Bear, I assume this was the commercial.
I would assume, we are having a water committee meeting coming up next Tuesday at 12 o'clock.
Okay.
There have been several issues raised about that.
Okay.
I'll be glad to take your concern to the committee, and we can pull your information. You are welcome to attend,
Okay.
or if we have your contact information on there, we
It
can
is there.
contact you and let you know about it.
And the second thing is, last week, water company did some work in front of Fox Mountain Inn. They dug a hole, then they fixed the hole, but they left the dirt all over the place. It's so high, I can't even cut the grass. I don't have any tools to fix it, so I want to ask you to tell the water company, come and fix that, please. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Knight from Thrasher Group.
Yes, sir.
Did you want to speak during citizens' time? Or?
No, sir. No, sir. That's a mistake on my part.
Okay, I assume one of us made a mistake. So.
Yeah, I'll take that.
All right, the next person we have is Mr. Jerry Blevins. Mr. Blevins.
My domestic tourist report has not changed much since my last report. Something is messed with daily, but rarely is trespassing a problem. Most of the problems are cyber in nature, and one of the most interesting cyber attacks came on the morning of August 25th, 2022, and involved a horn noise at 5:50 a.m., followed by electrical shock at 6 a.m. while in my car resting. The electrical shock was equivalent to touching a 120-volt electrical circuit with no load on it. While being in my car and well above the ground potential, this would require a lot of cyber power, which is only possible by a very large computer, which only the federal government has, to the best of my knowledge. This is the first time I've ever been shot before, so apparently the Secret Service has stepped up its intimidation power to frighten me into not pursuing my legal case against the parties that have been giving me problems in the past. If this is what they were trying to accomplish, it failed, because I'm not concerned with death due to my close relationship with my mortal friend, who is very good himself at moving large quantities of electrons through the air and either killing people or doing a lot of property damage. Recent cases in point was the underground fuel tank in Giles County, which was struck by lightning and exploded, doing a lot of damage. Also, 3 people were killed by lightning while in view of the White House, and 2 others injured. Many years ago, I was visiting a farmer in Surrey, Virginia, on business when he asked me to walk around to the back of the house so he could show me something. At the back of the house, there was a large field that had approximately 200-foot plow ditch to it, and the farmer told me that it was lightning that had made the ditch and not a 16-inch bottom plow as one would assume. Many things I have witnessed through the years have truly impressed me when it comes to the power of my mortal friend. However, most of our current problems of late appear to be climate-related, which includes huge fires in the West, 1,000-year floodplains, droughts, extreme heat, which has set a new all-time record in Sacramento, California of 116 degrees. These problems, along with new viral diseases which have come our way in the last couple of years, have created a lot of stress on our lives, dropping life expectancy by 2 years. Except for gasoline prices, most everything else has gone up at an astonishing rate. The Federal Reserve has decided this is inflation and is trying to fight prices by raising interest rates, which seems to have made the situation worse. In the last couple of weeks, things seem to have started to change rapidly. It will be interesting to observe how people deal with the new problems facing them. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Blevins. That's all we have signed up for citizens' time, so I'll close citizens' time.
Is it open for other concerns to be raised during the citizens' time, or is it?
No, the way, we have a sign-up sheet, sir. You sign up before the meeting.
Mine's a similar concern as Mr. Menta. It's about the water bill. I've got the Super 8 off of Fort Chisholm Road. I was gonna talk about that as well, but kind of show us.
We're not gonna make a decision tonight. Like Mr. Bear said, we have a water committee meeting coming up on the
Tuesday.
this next Tuesday
It's next Tuesday?
at 12 o'clock.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. And that'll be here as well, in here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is we have a public hearing for the solar energy project revenue sharing ordinance. I will read the public hearing notice as required by the Code of Virginia. In compliance with the Code of Virginia of 1950 and amendments thereto, the Wythe County Board of Supervisors will conduct a public hearing to consider an ordinance entitled Solar Energy Project Revenue Share Ordinance of Wythe County, Virginia. The Board of Supervisors shall hear comments from citizens concerning the proposed ordinance on Tuesday, September the 13th, 2022 at 6:05 p.m. in the boardroom of the Wythe County Office Building, 340 South 6th Street, Wytheville, Virginia. A copy of the proposed ordinance may be found online at www.withco.org or at the County Administrator's Office, 340 South 6th Street, Wytheville, Virginia, for public review. So I'll open up the public hearing for the revenue sharing ordinance, and we have one person signed up to speak, Mr. Dickie Morgan. Mr. Morgan.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. When I read this ordinance, I'm not sure what the intent of this thing was, but as I read it, anybody that puts up a solar panel is supposed to do this, I'm assuming, because the thing says all solar sources. And that looks to me like would stifle the private citizen from putting in a solar system. To me, it's a tax.
Mr. Baird,
Yeah, Mr. Fogden and I can help address that, and I'll let you sort it out.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
the ordinance has a size before it applies. So it's mainly for a larger scale operation. So if I put solar panels on my roof or in my field beside my house to support my single-family residence, this tax doesn't apply. It's only for a large-scale project. That's in there somewhere. I'll pull it up and look at it, but it says so many megawatts
Yeah.
or greater is what.
20
what it
megawatts or
applies
less
to.
are not
Yeah.
covered by this ordinance.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I didn't catch that part.
That's all right, I'm up here scrolling, Mr. Moore, I know it's in there, but I can't find it.
Under
Yeah.
section 2.
Yeah.
This is on
Yeah,
large-scale utility
Well,
solar
that was my
complexes.
main question on the thing, so, thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, that's all we have signed up for the public hearing on that, so I'll close the public hearing. Mr. Barrett, do you have anything to add on that?
As just discussed, this is, we have been working on solar for quite some time. Mr. Hankins and I have been looking at different parts of solar. This is one of the tools that the General Assembly has provided localities in lieu of the machinery and tools tax and the decrease in depreciation. You can enter into revenue sharing agreements. Many of the projects that have talked to us about this have been anticipating such an ordinance coming in place, and most localities have gone to this ordinance. Staff's recommendation would be to adopt this ordinance for the revenue sharing.
All right, I'll open the floor for any motions in regards to ordinance 2022-3.
I'll make that motion.
All right, I have a motion to adopt Wythe County Ordinance 2022-3 by Ms. Lawson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Cook. Is there any questions or discussion? And I'll just to clarify Mr. Morgan's point again, this is for commercial solar farms and not residential.
Not residential, yes.
I finally found that section. Does anybody else have any questions or discussion on that? All right, here and now we'll do a roll call vote with Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Aye. All right, so approved. Next item on our agenda is our payment of invoices. Each board member has received in their package a copy of the invoices presented. I'll entertain a motion to pay the invoices.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Horny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Terry. Is there any questions, discussion, or any invoice any board member would like to pull out? Here and now, we'll do a roll call vote with Mr. Terry. Aye.
Aye.
So approved. Next item is our minutes from our previous meeting from August the 23rd, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Burnett. Is there any questions, corrections, or additions to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Aye. So approved. Move on to old business. We have some appointment vacancies. Mr. Baird, do we have any?
I've been working on the Mount Rogers PDC. We put this on there just in case the East Wytheville Recreation, if anything's come up on it yet. So,
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we appoint Matthew Shaver for the Recreation Commission for East Wytheville.
All right. Have a motion to appoint Mr. Matthew Shaver to the Recreation Commission for the East Wytheville District. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Terry. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So approved. Congratulations, Mr. Shaver. Anything else under appointments?
No, sir.
All right. Move on to new business. We have the Wythe County School Superintendent, Dr. Poole. Good afternoon, Dr. Poole.
Good evening, sir. Mr. Chair, members of the board, Mr. Barrett, thank you for this opportunity to come and speak to you this evening about Wythe County Public Schools. One thing I want to make sure that everyone receives a copy of their FY '23 budget book. It's the updated information, and going forward, we will, this one is the first one where you have a comparison, budget to budget from last year to the current year. So going forward, we will just update that information as we add to it. So I think it's a good reference point and something, once we get into the budget process, will really be handy for everyone involved. As you note, the budget is much larger this year than it has been in years past, but that's because there are approximately 27 million reasons why that budget has increased. Keep in mind also that the state had additional money in as well, and all things considered, the cost to Wythe County taxpayers was zero. So that's a good thing. Are there any questions about the budget book? I know there's a lot of information in there, and we spent quite a bit of time back in the spring, early summer, reviewing this information. But if you have any questions, certainly feel free to let me know, and I'll do my best to answer them. Just want to thank all the hard work that went into this from Katrina Hall, Sarah Dickens. That's a lot of information to compile. They do a wonderful job. Very conscientious. Any questions before I move on to some other information?
Are you gonna lead with some good news about?
Absolutely, good news.
Enrollment?
Good news, that's exactly where I was going to start.
I was hoping you were gonna lead with that, but.
So, our ADM, the budget that you have was built on an ADM of 3615.
What's
Average daily membership. So that is what we are funded on through state, and you have a number of other categories, and the local composite index, that determines what percentage of locality is bound to pay versus the state. Our local composite index is about 3.2, a little bit over 3.2, so that means roughly 32% of our budget is required for, from local funds in order to meet the local required effort. Now, when we budgeted for 3615, much to my surprise, our August 30th ADM was 3732. That means we have 117 additional students in our schools. That is a positive thing. That is reversing a trend that we have seen over the last several years, not just in Wythe County, but all over Southwest Virginia. So when you look at an additional 117 students, you're looking at additional state revenue of approximately $5,000 per student. So substantial money. So that's a positive. Now, the final number will be based on March 31st ADM. So many things can happen between the end of August and the end of March. However, it's always nice to start off in the black. So that's a good thing. Some more good news, and you guys have already heard this, but Wythe County Public Schools, SOL scores from the 21-22 test administration, Wythe County Public Schools ranks 11th in the state for SOL test scores. And we were shooting for top 10. We're well on our way to getting back there, but that is a great thing. Those are raw test scores. And when you're looking at the entire Commonwealth of Virginia, 133 separate school divisions, Wythe County is 11th. That's something to be exceedingly proud of. And reading, 15th, history, 14th, math, 12th, and science, 5th. So when you're talking about Wythe County competing with some of the wealthiest communities, not just in Virginia, but in America, that's something to be proud of. When you're in a small rural school division, a small rural county in Southwest Virginia in the middle of Appalachia, our students do as well as anyone. That means our students can go compete against anyone, and that's something that we're very proud of. So that's a feather in our caps, and that's for all Wythe Countyans. Very proud. That's something to crow about. More good news. Groundsbreaking ceremony on Friday, September 23rd, for the start of construction for Scott Memorial. That will be on the campus of George Wythe. Will be between the Tech Center and George Wythe. It's where the ceremony is planned. If it's raining, we'll move a couple shovels full of dirt in the gym and hold it there. So, but right now.
Not in that new gym.
Huh?
Not in that new gym.
We'll go enough. We'll go enough. But that's something we're very proud of, and I know everyone here is looking forward to getting started. We have our first construction meeting tomorrow, pre-construction with A&E firm as well as the general contractor to get everything rolling and get our laydown areas scouted out and hopefully start work end of October, 1st of November to truly get underway. So we're very happy. Just a reminder, Wythe County Public Schools, and I know I've mentioned this before, all Wythe County Public School students are eligible for free breakfast and free lunch based upon demographics within the county. That's all students in Wythe County. That was something that started during the pandemic and has continued based upon our free and reduced lunch numbers from 2019, I think was the last equating year. Reminder that tomorrow is the midterm point of the first quarter, the first grading period. That's kind of hard to believe, but we've been in school for a little over 4 weeks now. So, a couple of positives with manufacturing for excellence. I know several of you were involved with that last year. We're expanding that program, so there's not only manufacturing for excellence, there will also be healthcare for excellence this year. And in addition to that, the industrial maintenance program that we're working with WCC, where those students will be on the campus of WCC during the spring semester. When they graduate, they will be ready to go into industry, fully credentialed. That program, we have groups that have guaranteed those individuals, those graduates, an interview the minute that they complete it. That's a good thing. So we have a lot of positives happening with Wythe County Public Schools, a lot to be proud of. And I want to thank you all for everything that you've done to help us reach this point. That's a lot of information in a short amount of time. Are there questions?
Does anybody have any questions for Dr. Poole?
Has the pornography been taken out of the schools?
Stenography?
Pornography.
Yes, it has, yeah. As far as elementary and middle school, yes. Those books were actually the listing that we had, the elementary and middle schools. We didn't have any that stayed on any library shelves. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Dr. Poole, when you talked about the SOL scores and the rankings, and I agree with you, you know, we're producing a student that can compete not only statewide, but with other students across the nation. But I think we'd be remiss, and I'll channel Chair Waggy and Vice Chair Manley, because I've heard them say it. We also have teachers that can compete across this state, across this nation, as some of the best teachers, and that's how we turn out such good students. So, you know, on behalf of our board, you know, certainly we express our congratulations to the students and the faculty and teachers. I don't know that people realize what a hole COVID dug some of these students in. And like I said, it's really a testament to their hard work to get them, you know, back to where they're at. So, by top 10 would be nice. 11th.
Not bad. And one thing to remember, our scores are based on testing pretty much every student in our school division. And I know some of you guys that have been involved know this firsthand. This isn't testing 90% of our kids. This is testing pretty much 100% of our students.
We made it to 10th when I was administrator.
They were 10th before Dr. Poole was superintendent.
That's true.
Some big punches been through.
Dr. Poole, you should have awarded that you're in the top 10%. Based on the math, you said.
We are top 10%. We are top 10%. And, last year, and that's very true, you're coming out of a challenging time, to say the least. And for our students, our teachers, to be able to perform at this level is nothing short of extraordinary. Now, do we still have challenges and things that we need to work on? Absolutely. However, we're meeting that challenge, and we want to have expectations that are up here. We don't want to just be here. We don't want to be average. We want to be exceptional, and that's what we strive for. And that's what our expectations are. And thankfully, this community, this county, reaches those goals because they're striving for excellence, and that's what they want as well.
And I will say, at the school board meeting, myself and Ms. Lawson were there, and they went into greater detail with some of the categories, but there was a lot of categories where Wythe County was in the top 5%.
Our 8th grade science, which is a cumulative test, which is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, second in the state. So that's up there. And if you look at our economically disadvantaged students, in every one of our categories, our economically disadvantaged students performed higher than all students. So when they're ranking, if it was 15th in reading, our economically disadvantaged may have been 8th. The science, I think they were 3rd overall. So that's a testament to how well our students do. So when you're looking at subcategories, that's something to really be proud of, and the achievement levels that they have.
One of the challenges you had last year with attendance too, with the COVID
Yes.
still hanging around. I mean, that's, 11th is something to be really proud of.
Yes, it is, and that was something, in across the state, chronic absenteeism last year, when you're looking at kids that, were quarantined or sick, I mean, you had kids based upon quarantines that could have been out for 20 consecutive days. That's hard. That is hard. And when those kids are still able to achieve at that level and pass those tests, that's a great thing. That's a testament to our teachers making sure that they provide those lessons for those kids, for those parents, making sure that those kids complete those lessons. So that's all around. That's a team effort. So.
And Mr. Bear, I know you had sent out the email earlier today about the VACO Education Committee's survey that they sent out. And I don't know how many of you seen that email. And Dr. Poole knows where I'm going with this. The state has a surplus, has had a surplus. I don't understand why they cannot let us borrow school construction money at 0% interest as long as they have a surplus. And I really think that's something that VACO needs to ask our General Assembly. It's not just Southwest Virginia. We've talked to delegates in inner city Richmond whose schools are just as bad, if not worse, than some of the ones we've addressed. But it seems like every quarter, this governor, as well as the previous governor, likes to brag about what a surplus the Commonwealth has, but yet they want to charge us 3% on the school construction.
Taxes that are already have been levied and collected, and we're going to pay 3% on that makes no sense. So I don't know why we would need to levy an additional tax against the community when that money is already there. I'll jump on that soapbox with you.
And if I'm missing something or I'm wrong, somebody jump in here, I just, you know, they're charging us 3% to borrow our own money to build schools.
Well, you know how I feel about it.
You know, so when we go to Richmond, in January, it may be interesting. So, I mean, I just don't, you know, it goes back to my, you know, my other complaint about the surplus and, you know, they have unfunded mandates that the state's not funding, but yet they brag about having a surplus. No, if you're not fulfilling your funding obligations, it's not a surplus. I'll shut it down.
I'm with you on that. There's a tremendous amount of money that has already been collected, that it's not just Wythe County, every school in Virginia. When you look at the majority of schools were built during the 50s and 60s, those buildings are now, you know, 60 and 70 years old. And Wythe County fortunately has been able to renovate because we had a plan, but not all school divisions and not all counties have been capable of doing that. So unless there's a concerted effort at the state level, it's not going to get any better.
It's not like we're asking for free money. We'll
No.
pay it back. Just don't make us pay.
Just don't need to pay interest
on
on
our
it.
money. They run their finances like my wife does. All right, does anybody else have anything for Dr. Poole?
Thank you for everything.
Thank you.
Thank all of
Thank
you
you.
for everything.
If y'all have any questions or any, let me know. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
And if y'all want to book myself and Dr. Poole room in Richmond in January. All right, next item on the agenda is our draft emergency response agencies. Mr. Hankins, I believe this is you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Before I get started on the DARA plan, I do want to introduce our new 911 director. Mary Jo McKenzie is here with us. Mary Jo comes over from the sheriff's office after a few years of service. I'm not going to say the number.
Come on, tell us how many.
32, and she started when she was 12.
And I believe every word of that.
So, Mary Jo, did you want to say anything to the board before I get into this?
Thank you for being, thank you for letting me be here. And I'm glad to be a part of the county, as I was the sheriff's office. And if you need anything, just let me know, or let Matt know. Until I get fully on board. I'm fully on board, but not.
We're still trying to get her into her office
in
every
my
day.
office. Just got the key today, but I'm getting there. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Mary
you,
Jo.
and welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome up the hill.
Up on
Welcome
the-
again.
Up the hill.
up the hill.
This is related to 911. As you all are aware, the county has the authority to designate its emergency response agencies. We have the responsibility to provide emergency medical services for our residents, and the attached plan is one that was developed by Lead Mines Rescue Squad and our emergency management coordinator in coordination with Wythe Fire and Rescue. This plan is one that designates Rural Retreat Rescue Squad, Wythe Fire and EMS, and Lead Mines Rescue Squad as your three county recognized agencies that would run calls that are dispatched by the 911 center. This has been an issue lately because some secondary private agencies are soliciting business from, and the Fire and Rescue Committee knows this, we've had these conversations, but the secondary agencies are directly soliciting folks to call them in case of an emergency, not to call 911. We think that needs to be cleaned up. This plan goes a long way toward that. There are still some things to be done, still a few standard operating procedures to review. You'll see there's one highlighted in there about How long it takes to do a second page, that's one that we need to work out with our new 911 director's input. But this plan makes an effort to try to eliminate the possibility that these secondary agencies will be directly soliciting citizens unless we wouldn't need those secondary agencies to do emergency response unless we are out of ambulances, which happens on occasion, more often than I'm comfortable with. But, we're also working on plans to deal with that. You can review this plan further. You can adopt it. If you've got direction or specific changes, we'll be glad to make those. We do need to clean up the forms that are at the back, but we also wanted your input before we went to finalizing those forms. I'll be glad to answer any questions you may have, but that's the essence of it.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hankins?
I just thank you, Mr. Hankins, for getting this together.
Well, it was very little input from me. It was primarily those, our emergency management and those two agencies that wanted to work to put this together. They've had more than what they consider to be their fair share of problems in dealing with some of the secondary agencies.
Right.
And this is not anything that other counties aren't dealing with, but it's the best tool that we can put together to deal with some of those problems. We did have some discussions about whether or not we can enact penalties for agencies that violate this, and I still don't have a good answer for you.
We appreciate the efforts that everybody put into this. Once you get those forms and stuff cleaned up, I think, unless y'all want to act on it tonight, I think once everything's cleaned up, we'd be good to go.
That was gonna be my question, is what the pleasure of the board, do you wanna take action tonight, or what's your recommendation, Mr. Hankins?
If you tell us to clean it up and get the forms ready, we can present you with a final version in 2 weeks.
Is that the direction everybody like to go?
I'm good with that.
I'm okay with that.
Sounds like a plan. Thank you.
I appreciate all their work on it. It's a big improvement over what we previously had, and it spells out things a little clearer on this, so, it should help take care of some of our issues.
All right, anything else under the emergency response agency plan? All right, we'll move on to public safety radio system. Bad news, Mr. Hankins.
Just remember, you were appreciating me 30 seconds ago.
How quick I can change.
This is bad news in that it involves the expenditure of more money than we were anticipating spending for public safety radios. It is one that I would very much like to squarely blame the federal government for. This is something that relates to the licensure of radio frequencies from the Federal Communications Commission. It's a long, drawn-out process, one that takes too much time and too much effort from folks. It involves intermediaries called coordinators that have to work with the FCC. In trying to work with those coordinators, our contractor has found that we will not be able to license additional channels in the VHF band, the very high-frequency band. There are too many roadblocks to getting those additional channels here in Southwest Virginia. You have to get approval from surrounding public safety agencies, so it's not just the Virginia State Police, it's also I believe the Tennessee State Police and the North Carolina Highway Patrol that also have to sign off because they're so close here and frequencies can bleed over. Those agencies never sign off on adding channels close to them, so that leaves us with very few options. Either we can go with the system that we have that we're not happy with. We can back up and punt and say we start completely over. We withdraw from the contract with Procom and start completely over, and we don't know how much time that might cost us. The other alternative is to move to the UHF band and get licensed there. And our contractor has 90% confidence that we can get all the channels that we need to be able to do the DMR system, the county-wide simulcast system that we had originally designed, just moving into the UHF band.
We have met with the stakeholders. This basically would allow us to improve on the system that was designed. You get a little better building penetration with the UHF frequencies, so folks who are carrying their portable radios into schools or other buildings will have a little better coverage than was originally anticipated, just because of the way the waves work. There are a few advantages to the UHF. I still want to see it and know that it works the way it was intended, but our contractor says that this should get us to where we need to be. The problem is our VHF radios, and I don't have mine in here with me, but they do not work. Or we cannot just reprogram them and move them over to VHF, or UHF. We have to completely replace the handhelds, the ones that are in the fire trucks and the sheriff's cars and the ambulances. It's basically a complete redo of the equipment. Now, the good news is it's a pretty easy swap out, so we won't have a lot of cost involved in just swapping out the equipment, swapping the antennas. Really what we're looking at is an increase in cost of about $291,000. And by moving to UHF, we do realize some savings. In the printed copy that you have in front of you, you'll see we did not need as many repeaters because we're reducing, we're removing the paging channel. There's other options for the ways that we can do paging in this system. This also, because we're buying new radios, that's included in the purchase of the radio that's listed there. So they show that there's a deduct for the DMR licensing, but in total we go up to almost $291,000. Unfortunately, staff doesn't see a lot of ways around this. We believe we're pretty heavily invested in it at this point, and that in order to move ahead in about the same time frame that we had originally anticipated, that we should proceed with this as recommended by the contractor. Most of the increase in price is covered by the state contract, so it does not yield a procurement issue on our side. There's very few things here that are in addition to the original quote for this project. Most of the increase that you see is for equipment. So it takes it from a project that started at $1,017,000 and takes it to $1,308,000. I know that's a lot. That's sort of the 50,000-foot version. I'll be glad to try to answer any questions that you may have. If you want to proceed, we can come back to you in 2 weeks with a resolution to amend and appropriate the additional funds.
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hankins?
Are we gonna have to change anything in dispatch?
No, this will work with our existing consoles. The only thing that we'll have to change out is the radio heads that the consoles are attached to. It'll have to all move to UHF too. But it's just like swapping out in the cars. It's a swap out and you put the correctly programmed frequency in.
What's the funding source for this additional is still the ARPA?
As you know, we took in the ARPA funds as revenue recovery, so that went into your fund balance. We had originally anticipated that we would spend $2 million on broadband. Since we don't have to spend that, that gives you a little bit of flexibility in that range, although we wanted to use as much of that money that was left in reserve as possible for, I think, utility projects. So this will eat a little bit into that. But there's still some left in what we would call the ARPA funds, although we don't refer to them as ARPA funds anymore. It's now fund balance.
Sheriff Foster, you or Mary Jo have anything to add?
I don't, I'm newly into this, and Matt's bringing me into the radio stuff right now. I'm not, on board with it all right now. Do you know?
This is what
Austin.
I hope you're ready.
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have any questions for Mr. Hankins' discussion?
Do we have any repercussions, recourse, Matt, or Mr. Hankins, if this system doesn't work after we followed our vendor's guidelines to make this change?
It would be our normal recourse. We would have to take them to court, I would expect.
But we'd still have, I mean, in the original contract, isn't there something about that they have to have so much coverage?
They have to give us a functioning system within the coverage parameters that they promised.
And that would still be with this system?
Yes, sir.
How much input did we have in the parameters of the area?
We have the coverage maps that they did. What they're doing is they're putting microwaves at our sites. The microwave connections will provide us with the redundancy that we need throughout the county. And based on the radio propagation signals, it covers almost all the county. The areas that it doesn't cover, there's a few particularly deep hollows that it doesn't get into, and some areas in the national forest that it doesn't reach. So that's, you know, I'm pretty satisfied with the coverage as long as it meets what was projected in the signal propagation studies. And, you know, that's just something that we'll have to verify as the system is put into place.
Thanks, sir.
All right, so what's the board's pleasure?
I think we need to move forward with it, because the radios has been a struggle for many, many years at this point. You heard the sheriff say 35 years, so if this will fix it, I think we need to figure out and move forward with it, is my opinion, but I'm gonna move on.
Yeah,
You're two, because I agree with you 100%.
Okay, thanks, sir.
I agree with you. It's definitely a safety issue, so,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
mean, I don't see any other way around it.
My only recommendation would be recommending staff proceed with the amendment preparation and with the procedures. Only thing we'll look at is whether we add the total cost of the radios into the contract, or whether we just do that just enter that separately, whether it's state contract or less than state contract in the process, to do it that way. And then that way it doesn't get into any change order issues within the process.
So do we need to take any action tonight, or?
I think the amend and appropriate resolution would be the next thing. So if you're okay with us bringing that to you in 2 weeks, we can do that.
Does anybody not want to move forward? All right, sounds like a plan.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. All right, next item is our delinquent tax listing.
Request the board make a motion to approve posting of the real estate delinquents in the newspaper and both real estate and personal property on the website.
All right, I'll entertain that motion.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Smith. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So approved. Next is a favorite soapbox issue of mine, 2022 personal property tax relief rate resolution.
Mr. Chairman, I request the board adopt the resolution for the no car tax of whatever year that was, that has continued to dwindle down. As you see, it's about a 6% decrease this year, down to the 27.37% as prepared by the Treasurer's Office and the Commissioner of Revenue's Office. As you are aware, this is the annual amount that we apply. We get $1,500,813. So request you all drop this.
84 cents.
84 cents. Would request that you all adopt this resolution for 2022 personal property tax relief.
All right, I entertain a motion to approve resolution 2022-22.
So moved. I'll
Have-
second it then.
I have a motion by Mr. Cook, a second by Mr. Horny. Is there any questions or discussion? Even though Mr. Bear beat me to it, I just want to remind everybody that one time we were told they were going to do away with car taxes. Does anybody else have anything? All right, here and now, we'll do a roll call vote with Mr. Cook.
Aye.
Aye. So approved.
Mr. Chairman, if I will, as they get finished with the personal property and the real estate and everything that's done this year, we will still be looking at, the discussion that we had last year of creating the separate class of personal property vehicles to take into consideration for next year.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I have one thing? I did want to point out, and this is a lot of the contributing factor to the significant change in the rate. Last year, in our vehicles that were valued over $20,000, and I'm pointing this out because we know what the vehicle values have done when the new cars were not available. But for 2021, we had a little over 2,700 vehicles that valued at over $20,000. This year, we have over 5,200. We have a 2,500 vehicle count increase on vehicles over 20,000. So that's a huge factor in changing this percentage as much as it has. Because, and on the other side of that, as you adopted in the ordinance, vehicles only receive the tax relief rate up to the $20,000 mark. So over that, they pay our full tax rate. So just wanted to point that out as a contributing factor in the over 6% decrease of that rate.
I like the personal use vehicles valued at $1,000 or less, get 100% tax relief, and anything that starts, you can get more than $1,000. I'm not sure. All right, anything else on that, Mr. Barrett?
No, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, we'll move on to board reports. We have the Budget Committee.
Budget Committee met on September 7th, 2022, and recommends the following. Adopting the locality resolution for the New River Water Authority VRA bond.
All right, coming from committee, it doesn't need a second. Is there any questions or discussion on the VRA bond? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote with Mr. Terry.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
So approved.
Setting a public hearing for consideration of the proposed tax exempt for certain elderly and disabled persons ordinance.
All right, coming from committee, it doesn't need a second. Is there any questions or discussion on that? All right, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote with, do we need to set a date? I'm
Yes,
sorry.
I would recommend setting a date and to allow time to do it. I would do it for the first meeting in October, which I believe is the 11th.
And I'll amend the motion for this, Chairman.
All right, the motion's been amended to set the public hearing on October the 11th. Is there any question or discussion on that? All right, here now we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Cook?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
So approved.
Amending and appropriating $3,000 to account 31021-498107 and $1,500 to account 2102-498107 and their respective revenue accounts in order to process the bond forfeiture funds, or refunds, I'm sorry.
All right, coming from committee, it doesn't need a second. Is there any questions or discussion on that one? All right, hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote for Mr. Terry.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
So approved. Anything else from the Budget Committee?
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, move on to Board of Supervisors time. Mr. Cook?
The only one is to follow up on the playground. Just tell me where we are on that as far as the grant application.
Yes, we received word this week, or end of last week, I guess it was, that Our application has been approved for $50,000 of the $400,000 that was requested. So we have just received that notification, and that will be in your board package for the next time to look at acceptance of that award. That is far short of what we had hoped for, what we had requested, and we've got to take some steps to work on some other fundraising attempts to come up with our plan of action on that.
Okay. I'd look at it, though, that could go a long ways in fixing what's there.
Yes. Now, there's a stipulation with it that they're only giving us $50,000 if we raise the other $450,000 that goes with it. So we've got to maybe do a little bit of negotiation and discussion. We can't just take it and use it to repair what's there.
Anything else?
Yes, sir, that's all
All
I
right,
have.
thank you, sir. Mr. Burnett,
I have nothing at this time.
Ms. Lawson,
Nothing at this time.
the rather dapper gentleman to my left,
Yeah.
wearing that retreat orange tie, Mr. Smith.
Just for the record, I'm fulfilling my obligations to the bet. So I am supporting the colors of the River Tree High School. So congratulations on your win. So, I do have a couple things. Any updates, Mr. Byer, on the speed limit change? I know we talked to Mr. Fowler and they were gonna send another group down.
The only thing I got from them was the latest on the, that they had looked at it, you know, like moving south on 52.
Right.
Down there. They could not warrant any change. I was going to look at having a VDOT presentation at our next meeting just to
Okay.
let them explain the rationale and for you all to explain the rationale as to why it is needed.
Okay, thank you, sir. Staying with the guardrail on Gator Lane, it's still destroyed.
No update on it, and it's apparently not been repaired yet, so I'll ask them to tell me when they'll have a repair on it.
All right, thanks, sir. Mr. Hankins, any updates on the lead mines construction project?
But they've run into yet more issues. The slab on the back part of that building was apparently poured 20 inches thick. We've had a hard time believing that, but they've shown Johnny and Kyle how thick the slab was. That has created some problems, particularly for the plumbing. That there is plumbing going into that backside, so that has slowed them down some. And then, well, I don't have an update on when they expect to finish. We're pushing them as hard as we can, but we're getting about the same results.
All right, thank you, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Mr. Horning?
The only thing I've got is, I got a folder from Mr. Bear. It was given to us at the water committee, and that way it's on record that it was given back to him and he can file it wherever it needs to be filed. In the past, it's been locked in my safe at the house, so I think it was safe there too. Other than that, I don't have anything.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Terry?
I've got two soapbox things, Mr. Chairman. First thing is the situation that we have. I understand he was doing his job, but we've got to have a little bit of a leeway and a little common sense when it comes to the building inspection than a church tent. I fielded more calls over the church tent than I have anything else since I've been on here. And I've had that discussion with Mr. Bear, and I appreciate his help and assistance with that. So I want to apologize to the church that happened to publicly. The other thing, I'm horribly disappointed with Bland Foundation. I think it needs to be changed to the Town of Wytheville Bland County Foundation, in my personal opinion, because they don't really care to help us on any of our projects. And that's all the soapbox I have, sir.
All right, thank you, Mr. Terry. I also received calls about the tent situation, and the building inspector, and I've expressed my thoughts to Mr. Barrett. You know, we also have, a couple of auctioneers, in Wythe County that do it part-time, and it's a good resource for not only farmers, but, families who are trying to settle estates. And, you know, these folks, we don't have a Stanley King in Wythe County anymore that is a full-time auctioneer. Most of these people do it, outside their regular job. When they set up a tent on a Friday afternoon after they get off work, to have an auction on Saturday to help a local farmer or to help a family, you know, they don't need to be worrying about, you know, having to get a building permit and all that for a tent, you know. And I'll tell you what I told Mr. Bear, there's the spirit of the law and the letter of the law. Speed limit says 55, letter of the law says you can get stopped for 56. That's not the spirit of the law. So, I agree with that. One other thing, and I gave Mr. Hankins a hard time about bad news. I attended the regional jail meeting last Friday. And just to give you a heads up, they've increased the per diem by an additional $8 a day, which, Mr. Bear's math comes out to about a 25% increase. The problem is, they made their budget on a ADP, which is a lot like Dr. Poole's ADM of 800 and some inmates a day, and they're down to 640, I think, as of Friday. The state of Virginia, after the past couple of years of releasing a lot of state inmates, has realized they don't have enough inmates, so for the first time in the history of regional jails and sheriff's office jails, they're actually coming and picking up their inmates. Wow. And in the past, they would come up and pick one or two at a time, and now they're showing up and picking up 35 or 40, which is part of the reason we can't get trustees or a trash crew. Now, the problem with that is the regional jail still has an operations budget, which, you know, they have to meet. And they've closed some pods down. Of course, they're still short-handed, and they're hoping that by having less inmates from each jurisdiction, that at the end of the fiscal year, the budget will still be awash. We've allocated $2 million and some change. So their theory is that in order for them not to dig a hole in their operations budget, where they'll have to come back next year and ask each locality for more money to dig out of that hole, they've increased the per diem, and the suggestion was that they would revisit it in February. And based on my suggestion, if we could revisit it in February, we could revisit it every meeting. So we're gonna be looking at it every meeting, and that way each locality, if they see that their budget numbers are going sideways or they're gaining surplus revenue based on the numbers increasing, we can change the per diem. But like I said, I wanted to make everybody aware of that in case somebody asks you about it. Does anybody have any questions about the per diem? Does that make it clear as mud? I started to put it in an email, but I will say that Mr. Sweet, the county administrator from Pulaski, is the new treasurer for the regional jail board, and I won't say he's not as frugal as Mr. Bear, but he does watch money well, so we'll keep an eye on that. All right, next item on the agenda is, we have a closed meeting, Code of Virginia 2.2-3711A3, acquisition or disposition of real property to Apex Lease and property in the Speedwell District, and I will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved. Second.
Have a motion by Mr. Terry, I have a second by Mr. Smith. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're now in closed session.
Has convened a closed meeting on this date pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Whereas Section 2.2-3712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Wythe County Board of Supervisors that such a meeting was conducted in conformity with the Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Wythe County Board of Supervisors hereby certifies that to the best of each member's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by the Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting, to to which the certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as were identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, and are considered by the Wythe County Board of Supervisors. And Mr. Chairman, I'll make that a motion.
All right, I have a motion by Mr. Terry to ratify the certification. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Smith. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Mr. Terry?
Aye.
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 All right, so approved. I will entertain a motion to authorize the Assistant County Administrator to enter into negotiations for a lease for a tract of land in the Speedle District.
So moved.
Have a motion by Mr. Horny. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second by Mr. Smith. Is there any questions or discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call vote with Mr. Cook.
Aye.
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 All right, so approved. Mr. Barry, do you have anything else?
No, sir.
Mr. Hankins? Mr. Farthing?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I have one thing. The treasurer had asked a month or so ago about amending the delinquent county tax ordinance, where currently it applies only to real estate taxes. So when she collects real estate taxes and that gets, the law firm sends letters and stuff, they can add a fee onto that, and that gets passed on to the customer. She had requested that we amend that ordinance to add personal property taxes and other delinquent charges, which if she ever got to collecting water bills, we think that might be able to cover that as well. We've still got to look into that a little bit more, but so we have a draft amended ordinance, essentially adding these other taxes to the real estate tax collection charges that she can add on to the bill. And it's ready to go if you all can set a public hearing to consider whether we repeal and re-adopt, or repeal the old one and adopt the new one, or amend. Steve and I were talking about repealing the old one, adopting the new one, is the way it would probably be presented. But if we could set a public hearing for the, to consider the adoption of the delinquent county adoption and/or amendment to the delinquent county tax and administrative costs and attorney fees ordinance, 97-6, I think, is the ordinance.
Yeah, and you sent them up to me and Lori this morning, and she reviewed it, and she said, please add it to the 9/27 agenda, be glad to discuss it with the board. So,
Oh, okay,
yeah,
sorry, I
you
missed
may
that.
not have.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, so
Okay. She's happy to discuss it. So
She
we can
copied-
set the public hearing at the next meeting.
You weren't copied on, because I had copied Mark on it, but anyway, she's gonna bring it to the board then, but it is ready, she's looked at it, had no issues with it, was gonna
Okay.
go over it with you, so if you want, if that's okay with you, we'll do it to that meeting, and then.
Yeah, set the
we'll also
public hearing.
hearing.
Yeah, I jumped the gun on that.
We don't need to set it tonight?
Do not,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Anything else, Mr. Farthing?
No, sir.
Ms. Collins, you have anything? No, sir. Anybody else have anything to come before the board? If not, we'll be adjourned.